Hello and welcome to the Binge Thinker episode 7. My name is Jameel Raymond. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here today. If you are watching this on video, you will see a different backdrop. I am in my sanctuary, as I like to call it, which is my reading and reflection and meditation room. Thought I would switch it up a little bit, get you a different angle of who I am, even though I've deliberately put that plant there just to make the backdrop a little bit nicer. But hey, I might just keep experimenting with being in different places. If you're on audio, it doesn't really matter because I'm using the same gear. But if you're seeing video, you get to see a different angle of me, a different perspective. Isn't that nice? Today's episode is all about information. This is the second part of my grand crazy theory of what I think the perceptive process is to manufacture our perceptions of reality. As a bit of a refresher, I think the key processes are attention, information, cognition. That leads to perception. That perception creates our reality. So if you want to rework your reality to an outcome or a specific peace of mind that you need to survive and to thrive, let's fiddle around with these processes. That's what I've done to get to a point where I'm feeling pretty damn good about myself. So if I can pass it on to you and it can be of value to you, I've done my job. I've done something to give back. It's exciting stuff. Let's kick it off. So we talked about attention last week, the importance of attention, how attention is at war in the outer world because attention is the basis of all media and all of advertising, and you cannot commit to anything or perceive anything in your world without paying attention to it. Today's session is about, now you've fixated your attention on something, what is information is good for you, what information is bad for you, the changing face of information in the mainstream with the transition of traditional media to alternative media, in air quotes, and why we've gotten to this point where media seems to be at war with new generations. I mean, we can all see it, but hey, let's explore it as well. Huh? But I guess to start things off, what does information mean to me? Information means a lot to me. Knowledge means a lot to me. I've always been known for being a bit of a nerd, pretty smart, very bookish, someone that's always constantly been reading, learning, doing things. I'm always sourcing out new pieces of information. I have information sprawled out everywhere in my life and in my devices. I've got multiple note-taking apps. I've got shit all over my walls. I'm a constant flow of information and knowledge. And the application of that knowledge is what creates the most benefit. So, yeah, sure, you can look and read at things all day, but how are you actually using it? And that's what we're going to go through, about what are the cool, interesting ways that you can actually use this for your benefit. But to think about information, information and the application of knowledge has been a constant since God, day one, or even God itself. We have been constantly passing down information and knowledge since we can cognitively even understand that, even through our precognition, really. Evolution is based on genetic information that's being passed down based on the successful factors that have led to its being passed on, and is integrated, that information, into our genetic code to produce things like opposable thumbs. The way that we've evolved into bipeds and having feet as opposed to being monkeys, and having legs and being on our hind legs, rather. So we've been passing down information, sacred intelligence, since the dawn of time. It's probably inherent in the fabric of nature and reality itself. But where information has become a real tool for us as a species is the passing down and the reapplication of that knowledge to benefit us over time, which is what we have significantly advantageously between us and other species of animals, right? We are definitely the smartest things on this planet, which is sometimes a real shame when you look at the way that we do things in life, huh? But we've always had knowledge passed down first through story and by doing. Actually, it was first by doing. If I think about the caveman days, we were just throwing stones, inventing wheels, probably with a lot of grunts. But most of the things that we learnt when we were first aware of our own capability to learn would have just been through doing and replication and seeing what others do and seeing if it works or not. Then we were able to talk. And then we were through story, which is a significant evolutionary tool for our monkey to frontal cortex mind, something we discussed last week, is the application of story and narrative to educate. Storytelling and creating a narrative is a way more effective tool to permeate information into an individual or a collective's brain, because that's how we learn for thousands of years, is sitting around a fire or foraging together, talking little shit, spreading stories, talking about experiences. It's always had that narrative chain in our evolutionary process. Then when we were able to start writing and creating language and written language, that created scale of information, more than we could even probably compute from back in the day. Obviously, that knowledge was limited to within the language you could speak, but the fact that we could replicate information without having to take you through a physical process created a significant amount of efficiency. And again, one of the constants in this podcast, scale of information, capability, output. And then now we have come to digitize information. We have a collective consciousness now called the internet. And with that internet and the application and the storage of information at scale in a system that doesn't require a lot of human intervention to upkeep, thanks to servers and technology, the world is literally your oyster when it comes to information. And now we can see, with video content becoming the norm, we've sort of come full circle away from written language back into your kinesthetic, auditory, kinesthetic visual style of learning. And we'll talk about those types of learnings later on in the pod. It's called the VARC, systems of learning. But now information travels at the speed of light through the internet. I mean, technically information has always traveled at the speed of light because that's how we receive light information through our eyes. Our eyes are our biggest sensory organ when it comes to information received. It's a key aspect of maintaining focus and creating attention. Ocular focus creates physical focus and mental focus. And now, thanks to the internet, the internet has always operated at the speed of light, but I don't think people actually know how the internet works unless you work intimately with the internet like I have for many years. We just take it for granted. Right, so here's a little 101 on how the internet works. This is the basics of computer science. And I had to refresh this myself because this is some really nerdy shit. But I think it's interesting. I think people should teach the history of the internet and how that works. I think we should know that now. If people are going to be bored about microbiology and all these sorts of things in high school, they should learn how the source of all their education and knowledge now being applied through the internet works. So let's start with the absolute basics of the binary system. So the binary system is literally ones and zeros. It's a way of transmitting information through ones and zeros on and off over and over again. Literally, it sounds dumb, but it's so ridiculously simple. Everything that you see in the digital world, from the podcast that you're listening to the porn you browse at night, all of that is ones and zeros. Off and on. That's it. So the smallest form of data, the smallest measure of data, which is a bit, is a sequence of 8 either on or off binary bits, right? So if it's 0, 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, 1, that's 4 off, 4 on. And that is generally considered the smallest bit or the smallest measure of digital data. So that is replicated again millions upon billions of times, just ones and zeros. And they can they're converted into letters, they're converted into numbers, they're converted into colors. Colors are made up of ones and zeros. It blows my mind how computer science and the binary system works. It's pretty insane. But if you know anything about quantum physics, matter and energy, same thing. Matter is 1, energy is 0, because matter is the on aspect of it. It's a physical or an engagement of something physical. Zeros, which is energy, is the nothing. It's the intangible aspect, even though it exists and we experience it, but we can't necessarily feel it every day. But we'll get into the quantum crazy shit later on. Pack some mushrooms, it'll get weird. So with that, ones and zeros, all those ones and zeros pass through these gigantic cable networks for the most part. So if you're at home on the physical internet and you've got an Ethernet cable, there is literally trillions of ones and zeros being transmitted through electricity from your house to a fiber optic cable that's in the street that goes to a bigger fiber optic cable in a local telephone exchange, which goes to an even bigger fiber optic cable somewhere. There's some massive backhauls across the city. There is millions and millions of kilometers of fiber optic cable, which is just essentially glass that permeates the underground of a lot of our planet now, if you think about it. So pretty much anywhere that has a fixed internet connection has a massive backhaul of glass and copper because they can transmit electricity through them. So that electricity, which is concentrated light of photons and electrons, moves at the speed of light constantly. And you might wonder, hey, if it's moving at the speed of light, why do I get lag? Well, the speed of light still has its own limitations about how fast it can go, and as well as the pipes and the pathways that it gets transmitted to. So for example, it still takes a little bit of time, no matter how far the distance, for light to transmit. So for example, if you were to try and get data from Melbourne to London, you have a latency of about, I think it's 250 milliseconds, right? So that 250 milliseconds to get information from London to Melbourne. And that's just because even with a most direct path of that fiber network, the speed of light still has limitations. Now, 250 mil, does it sound like a lot? Not necessarily, but if you're a gamer or if you've got a very highly sensitive application that needs hair trigger responses and tangibility and capability, that feels like a lot. All my gamers will know if you've got 250 ping, you're in a bad situation. So what else causes this lag in information and the speed of light? Well, the pipes, right? So for example, if let's just say you've got a 200 megabyte file, but you've only got, a 10 megabyte connection. Well, there's only so much you can put of all that 200 megs into that 10 megabit pipe at once. And that's what creates delays. That's why our internet sucks in Australia, is because between 4 and 6 o'clock when all the kids get home from school, they're all on the internet and they congest the network with their own ones and zeros of TikTok and whatever the fuck else kids do nowadays. I was going to say Bluey, but that's for babies. I don't know. I'm out of touch with the kids, which is a good thing because I'm not a priest. So latency, bandwidth constraints, those are the main two things that restrict information being transmitted at the speed of light. But we still have a massive dearth of information that is available to us, which is great. Let's talk about Wi-Fi as well while we're at it. So yeah, maybe you are not on a fixed internet connection. Maybe you're using mobile, or maybe using Wi-Fi, right? So how the Wi-Fi works is that Wi-Fi works at the speed of sound, because how that works is the ones and zeros are being transmitted through radio signals at frequencies that we cannot hear or perceive. So Wi-Fi now is at 5 gigahertz, which is the more modern version of Wi-Fi. It used to be 2.4 gigahertz, but 2.4 gigahertz is usually the same frequency that microwave, like actual microwaves to cook your food in, operate in. So sometimes if you're using 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi and you turn your microwave on, you get lag because the two different signals are interrupting each other. But when we say 5 gigahertz, what a hertz is the cycle of a frequency of a sound wave or any wave relative to time. So if you were to look at the ocean, for example, and you saw a wave come in and go away and it took a second, that is 1 hertz, 1 cycle per second. Now, 5 gigahertz is fucking fast, because it doesn't really, giga sounds like 1,000 usually, but it's actually a shitload more. We're looking at 5 billion cycles per second. That's how fast that wave is moving. So it's imperceptible to us because it's so fucking fast. And that's what's crazy, is that all of the Wi-Fi that exists, a lot of the new Wi-Fi that exists nowadays is literally moving at an information rate in frequencies at 5 billion cycles per second. All around us, imperceptible to us and our limited sensory capability, but it's just floating around there nonetheless. I reckon that's fucking insane personally. That's why I love tech, is that all of this stuff is happening around us imperceptibly, but when you take a deep look into it, it's really, really just interesting, engaging stuff. And here's just to give you the amount of scale and how fast things actually move when it comes to computing. 1 minute of a podcast, just the audio of a podcast, is approximately 1 meg. So about 1 megabyte per minute. And like we said before, a bit is one of the 8 in a byte. So 8 bits to 1 byte. 1 megabyte is actually 1 million bits. No, is that right? 1 megabyte, is 8 million bits, because each byte contains 1 bit. See, I told you, this shit's complex. So, to correct myself, 1 megabyte contains 8 million bytes. 8 million bits. Correct. There we go. 1 megabyte equals 8 million bits. That means there is 8 million sequences of ones and zeros occurring all at once. I think I fucked that up, but you get me. 1 minute of internet, or 1 minute of podcast, means 8 million ones and zeros that are being transmitted, converted into my dumb voice in your ears right now. Insane. Insane, personally. I love it. So the term of misinformation is being weaponized by legacy and mainstream media to try and counteract their loss of influence and them losing to new media. But that's because they have lost the central trust of society by being untrustworthy, illegitimate, and misinforming us time and time again for the sake of their own survival. And it's the only way that they can try and win people back, is to make the enemy radioactive and make them dangerous. But are they really just playing the better the devil you know situation? Because mainstream media has lied to us time and time again. You know, you think about all the different fucking media corrections. For example, like newspapers can absolutely ruin people's reputations, can create false narratives and use their exploitative nature of shock and horror to damage reputation. But if they fucked up and they have to correct it, that's not the front page news. Their corrections go in a tiny little fucking section of the newspaper in the bottom corner next to the obituaries where nobody reads. And to be honest, they should be in their own obituaries at this point in time as well. I mean, you think about all of the misinformation that is given to us through those commercials and infomercials that are late at night, or being fed to us first thing in the morning on fucking Sunrise and all that bullshit. Don't talk to us about misinformation. You rely on it to sell advertising so you can survive. It's rampant hypocrisy, and people are seeing right through it. And you've got to think about the way that they've talked to us about this misinformation is like we are children that do not have discernment, that we do not have the capability to make our own decisions up about what is right and wrong, true or untrue in our lives. And it doesn't really matter anyway, because for the most part, we talk about things and we take in things according to our own biases anyway. So you're really not going to convince people that they're wrong of something if they're convinced they're right, no matter how much contradicting information you give them. I mean, that's why we've got flat earthers. That's why we've got just a bunch of ridiculous conspiracy theories. Well, not conspiracy theories, but more of the dumb ones, like flat earthers, ridiculous. Pardon me. But we also need to understand that journalism isn't necessarily in pursuit of the truth anymore. It's in pursuit of survival now, because most journalism was permeated through mainstream media, network news. We now know and have known for a long time that commercial television and commercial media survives on the dollar of its advertisers. So they are the masters of the information, because they will not allow, advertisers will not allow information that damages their brand and perspective to be broadcast at scale when they're trying to provide this, solution to all your problems. So we already know immediately the truth that is being prescribed by mainstream media is always going to be tainted by the interests of the advertisers that support that program. And now we are seeing the compromise of the most valuable aspect of mainstream media, which is to inform us with the news and be objective about the truth of what's going on in the world. And that is now being weaponized against us, and it is failing. It was working for a while, probably I reckon since 9/11. I mean, I could be wrong about that, but that's certainly from my perspective. I was only politically and more socially aware of the news and what it did from that point onward, because I had no choice. As a Muslim, I was being weaponized and demonized by the media. So how long have they used the news to politicize their own agenda to create and fuel their own outcomes? It could be since day one, I'm not too sure. But it seems like the glory days of mainstream news and integrity within journalism has long gone. How many years has it been gone? I don't know. Ask Neegs. I'm not too sure. But the last-ditch attempt by traditional media to keep our attention and maintain their old model of doing things is by sensationalizing the news, sensationalizing the truth and what they see out in the field, by manipulating what's happening and reframing it towards their own agenda. I mean, you look at our news ecosystem now. Murdoch Media, Rupert Murdoch, News Corp, owns 70% of our media landscape. And he is a righty for sure. He's a conservative. He gave up his Australian citizenship to be an American. He owns Fox News, which is the mouthpiece of the right and the right wing and all of conservatism in the West. It's obvious to see their political agenda in the way that they hire their journalists, in the way that they attack the government and question its integrity, and the way that it blows over all of the liberal governments who it supports fuck-ups. Kevin Rudd, former Prime Minister Kevin Rudd, has put a massive torch on this with his Rupert Murdoch. He's trying to get a royal commission for Murdoch Media to break up the monopoly, to make sure that the discourse and the narrative of the news is not negatively influenced or biased towards the right like it is now, and B, just show how much of a dangerous influence this information has in affecting society in general. And it's not necessarily true, but it's allowed to happen because the systems that rely on it to survive, which is all of the 70% of those media networks, they need to survive, and they're willing to compromise the truth to survive. Because if they don't have these jobs, where the fuck else are they going to go? They have to rely on these conservative platforms to survive, to spread their agenda so they can eat and they can, be individuals and survive. It really is all about survival. That's the common theme here. That's the problem, is when you're in pursuit, are you in pursuit of your own outcomes, or are you in pursuit of the truth? Now, there's nothing wrong with being in pursuit of your own outcomes if you've got to survive, but that's the difference between the surviving and the thriving mindset. Is when you're surviving, you're only thinking about yourself, the short term, the right now. When you are thriving, you can look ahead. You can have a broader perspective. You've got the ability to outreach and have empathy and think about the long game. But it's very, very obvious that because traditional media is on the decline, they are in survival mode and they are scrambling, and they become increasingly desperate to keep their attention through any which way, but it's just creating further compromise in the trust that we had in them and that we've lost. I think this about particularly the thought or the trend around authenticity. Authenticity now is in. People are talking about their struggles. They're talking about, they're willing to be fuck-ups and just be themselves on TV or any media format, which is a good thing. It's an absolutely good thing because it hasn't created these false expectations of what we're supposed to be, because we learn from our environment constantly. And mainstream media has done this very good job of putting up these polished, highly perfected media personalities to reflect what the human condition should be. And that appeal of celebrity has created so much social unrest, so much negative perceptions within ourselves and in the community of what we should be striving for. And then we've seen that fail time and time again by celebrities fucking up or breaking the expectation of what is right and good, compromising on their own perceived moral code. But in reality, they were always those imperfect people to begin with. Just they've had the veneer polished over them by networks, by the media, because it feeds their narrative of the superiority that they have above all of us and what we do to strive to get towards that. But they're imperfect, just like we are. And it's great that people are just normalizing celebrity and taking that down a peg, because it just creates so much more unnecessary wanting and reaching towards things that don't necessarily serve us. But again, those celebrities are in survival mode for the most part. They were striving to be someone of note, someone to be respected, someone to be loved. They wanted the attention. And very, very often they were willing to compromise who they truly were or distort who they actually are to achieve those outcomes to survive. because that's the way that they valued themselves, and to survive within that value system, they had to do those things, which is a shame, but everyone does that in some way or form in their lives, and will continue to until we all figure it out somehow. So that's what the celebrity side and the fakeness of celebrity has done to break down the social trust of mainstream media. The other side of that, I think, is also reality TV. Because reality TV is not real. It is now increasingly manufactured. You know, you think about Maths or The Block or Big Brother. It maybe back in the day when it first came out had just genuine conflict and genuine interpersonal issues and drama. But now it's all manufactured. We know that so many of these reality stars are fucking paid actors. We know that the producers get in to change narratives to, you know, fuck people up so they can create drama, so it keeps people engaged. When reality TV was sold to us, because I remember it coming around when I was starting to switch on to what was happening in the media. You know, I think about Big Brother, the first Big Brother and things like that. It was supposed to be this slice of life, voyeuristic look into the real world, as if we weren't existing in it ourselves. And that was massively successful. Just putting real people into interesting situations, see how they react, see how they respond. But again, that became more synthesized and contrived as it grew on, because they had to up the ante to maintain the attention, because it became competitive, because it was so successful as a concept, to the point where they tried to control the narrative by making producers, you know, create storylines and conflict and bullshit. But then people saw through that. Again, people see through this bullshit over time. They see the pattern. And then they go, well, this isn't real. Where is real? I want real. We value the truth. We value, good or bad, what isn't mired or isn't tainted by people's desires and outcomes, or what they're trying to get over you for their own needs and their own means. And that's why people are moving towards this authentic way of consuming media, whether it's right or wrong. I talked about this in a previous pod. Conviction is way more powerful than convincing. To have conviction in what you say, right or wrong, is way more influential about whether the information's actually right to begin with. How do you think people like Hitler and Trump got into power? They played with the conviction of the energy of their truth, which wasn't necessarily true, but they perceived it to be their truth, and they were so convinced of it, they would be able to convince other people of it. And that's what people of influence have always done. When we talk about the dreamers, right? Or people of influence that are for the positives. I've got on my wall in my house, I've got these 4 plates, and they're like modern hipster versions of the modern dreamers. So there's Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, the Dalai Lama, and Martin Luther King Jr. Now, all of those people are considered dreamers. And are their dreams necessarily, you know, might and truth? No. But it's an ideal that we all relate to, and they say it with such conviction, and they live it within their actions, that's appealing to us as a society. And that's why we deitize them, right? And you don't see that genuine conviction in the way that the everyday person is perceived in mainstream media. Why? Because they're afraid of the consequences of being themselves, and they're not allowed to be themselves because the people that create the framework around them so they can be on the media, which is the producers and the networkers, they need to control that narrative so they can sell advertising. But when you've got a platform now, which anyone can get onto, including my dumbass, where you can literally share what you really truly feel and think, and hopefully you've put those thoughts to something that is somewhat coherent. I know I'm struggling with that. Fucking hell. But that truth or the way that you perceive things, that is what is so desired by people, by the individual. I don't know what it is, but we just get dumber and dumber the more we collect. The more we become more of a collective, we just do get dumber. And maybe that's why the narrative is so pandering sometimes from mainstream media, because we just dumb down into cattle sometimes. We really do. And even the smartest people are always sucked into it. I know I've been sucked into fads. Not too many, thankfully. But it happens, right? It just happens. But they understand that. The media understands that, and they leverage that to their advantage to sell shit. And that's how they survive. And to go back to this misinformation, think about the way that advertisers, or think about the things that have been advertised to us by media for our benefit, for the truth, for the correct information. Things like cigarettes, things like we have to regulate these advertisers and these media companies not to put on gambling and alcohol and junk food ads at specific times so kids don't get influenced by this stuff because they know they get influenced by them. And we have to enforce a regulation instead of just having some sort of moral code to go, hey, maybe we shouldn't put on booze ads at fucking 8 a.m. when kids are getting to school. No, we had to regulate that because they weren't doing it. Just like when auto car companies back in the day didn't want to put seatbelts in cars because it would affect their bottom line. So they pushed against it, and it had to be enforced by a regulator instead of having some sort of moral code to go, hey, this minor change is keeping our customers unsafe and it's killing them, but it's going to cost us more to retool the car a little bit. Fuck it. No way. How does that translate into a trusted and reliable source? Because we all consider the corporation to be this just one big dollop of an entity, right? When we think about corporate anything, the corporation, all of these networks are corporations, and they are faceless, not demure, but they are faceless entities that we understand are only existing for their own survival. And when you understand the nature of what a corporation is and supposed to be, when you understand the nature of what that is, it's very easy to predict what they're going to do and what they're going to say, because all they're trying to do is survive. And patterns of survival are pretty consistent across anything and everything. But is that immoral to survive? No, not necessarily, right? I like to think of business as like the last hunting ground. That's what it's really been put out there, right? It's corporations and now predators and prey, and it is just literally the Wild West. Now, we do have regulation, thankfully, but I think we understand it to be a predatory environment because we cannot get rid of the hunter and the and the apex predator that exists within us as a species. We've just transmuted it into some weird logical system of business and enterprise and all that sort of shit. But all of the inherent instincts to hunt and kill still exist within the corporation. We've just transmuted it. So once you understand what the predator does and you understand its behaviors, it's very typical and it's very easy to understand how they're going to operate in an environment, which we're seeing with the mainstream. We're seeing with mainstream media now, is that they're going, you know what? Fuck, we're dying here. It's time to scramble and it's time to up the ante so we don't fucking collapse here and become completely and entirely useless. That's why they're attacking people like Joe Rogan and other podcasters for misinformation, but mostly Joe. I mean, we've seen the hit piece that's come out in the last couple of weeks around his use of the N-word. Yeah, it wasn't great, but who is bringing this stuff out? It's definitely paid for and has been manufactured by interest groups that do not want the power that Joe has to be maintained by Joe and be brought back to traditional means. And you can see why. Because he holds so much power. I saw the Nielsen ratings from like last year or late last year. Joe gets 11 million viewers per day. And that is more than the top three it's the top three competitors in that stream. So it's Joe, and then it's like 2 Fox and 1 CNN TV show. And those other three competitors combined still don't have the combined viewership of Joe. He is an absolute titan of media at the moment in the media landscape. And there's really nothing that the mainstream media can do about it because this has been coming for like 10 years. They've seen their revenues decline. They've seen their viewership decline, and they've done nothing to effectively evolve to it because the trust is being lost. And they might have digital presences and digital channels, and you can access these articles and these little bits on the internet now, but it's not necessarily about the delivery of the content. It's the content itself. It's inauthentic, it's bullshit, and we're not falling for it. So what makes Joe so dangerous is that you see his pursuit of truth, and not the truth, but his own subjective truth. And we inherently understand that pursuit because we all know that we know when people are authentically just trying to be honest about what they do. And that authenticity permeates how we feel about someone. And again, good or bad, we align to it. And when you are upfront about the fact that you should not be taken seriously, like Joe says, and that he is just curious and pursuing knowledge for his own curiosity and his own benefit and for other people's benefit that listen to it, he allows the use of discernment. He's encouraging discernment. He's not trying to treat you like an idiot. He's going, here's the information that I've got. Make your own fucking mind up. Do your own research. Do not use me as a singular trusted source of information. And the irony which occurs in a lot of things is the more leash you give people, the more they trust you. The more freedom they give you, the more freedom you give someone, the less they want to actually use it. Because we have this, counteractive force within ourselves that we just resist every boundary. But if you don't create any boundary, we generally will just stay in the same place. I can tell you that with time when it comes to me. I need a deadline. I need a boundary to work effectively and to get my best work done. But if I don't have a time limit, I'm fucked, man. I just become so lazy because I'm like, I can do it later. But just see how that counteractive nature of what we do, the more you try and restrict us and the more you try and pull us in, the more we're going to push out. And with the way that the new media exists, you curate your experience. If you think Joe is full of shit, change the fucking channel. There's so many other sources of information and sources of truth that you can get out there. And that's what applies to anyone that's putting their media out now. You align according to your beliefs, your biases, to the people that you connect with. And over time, your perceptions may change and evolve. So then your sources of information will change as well. And that's what we're seeing now. We're just seeing an en masse changing of the guard when it comes to perceptions of the truth and the use of information for the benefit of the collective as opposed to the individual, which is the corporation. So, what do we do about managing information to our own benefit? Right? So number one is applying this to your inner world. It's about making the choice to learn, to choose to learn. the information that is out there in the world is entirely dependent and is entirely utilized by your application to it and your appreciation of it. So personally, I've always had an always learning mentality. Why people think I'm smart, and which I am, I don't deny that, is that I'm always learning. I'm always curious. I hoard information because I'm just interested in so many things that my brain just sucks it all up. And by always learning, I'm always evolving. My perceptions are always changing. The outcomes are always getting more efficient because I'm in this constant pursuit of education and learning. And that's been one of my most potent tools for self-development and will continue to ad infinitum. Right? One of the major keys to having a growth mindset as opposed to a fixed mindset is to not limit yourself with the knowledge and the resources that you have in hand. I mean, how can you grow if you are limiting the information that you've got in your ecosystem, in your spectrum? So always be filling your mind with the information. If you're feeling stagnant about where you are and what you want to do, you've got to fucking change the station of the information that is in your minds. You've always got to be searching for those sources of truth or sources of value that you can apply to yourself to become a better individual. So learning is obviously number one. So let's talk about, sure, you want to learn, but here's the question. How do you learn? Do you know how you actually learn? Because once you learn how you learn, which is getting quite meta, the process of learning becomes way more efficient and you become way more effective at getting the information you need. So like I said before, we're going to talk about the VARK model, which is the 4 key areas of the types of learning that people engage in, and people vary from, model to model or section to section, right? So VARK, V-A-R-K, means the 4 modalities of learning. Number 1 is visual. So if you're a visual learner, you like to observe things. You like diagrams. You like pictures. You like to see things how they're done. You could, A is for auditory. You like to listen to things. You like podcasts. You like lectures. You like reading out loud, anything that's related to verbal. R is for reading and writing. That's kind of just linked to visual, but you're maybe someone that likes to take notes. Maybe you like to browse a lot of things like I do. And then kinesthetic is the doers, touching, feeling, being involved, involving your body in some way. So you've got a more touch and physical base when it comes to taking in information. So there are plenty of tests online to figure that out. So if you look up VARK, types of learning, there's plenty of quizzes. I know that I'm a visual kinesthetic learner. So I like to read things. I like to look at models and diagrams. But then I also learn a lot of things by just fucking doing and being experiential. That's how I learned a lot of the things that I do today. Just by fucking doing them over again, analyzing, iterating, improving. So if you are someone that hasn't really chosen to learn something in a while, take a step back. Go look at the VARK model and then figure out who you are. And there are plenty of resources online, which is what I'm going to be talking about now, the inner world, about searching for the informations and learning how to learn and then applying how you learn to yourself so you can be more efficient at it. All right? So do the quiz. Find out what you are. You can probably kind of figure it out anyway if you just sort of reflect on yourself and go, how did I learn things the most? Do I like to read more often? Do I just like to tinker with things more often? Do I listen to a lot of podcasts? You can probably do some reverse engineering based on your own experience, but sometimes it's better just do a model, have it thrown at you. It's a nice little breadcrumb to figuring it out in full. So another concept when it comes to developing a growth mindset is to not limit yourself in the belief of what you can learn. That's another thing for me, is that I don't think that my brain necessarily runs out of space. I know that if I don't practice some things, it'll degrade over time. Lots of knowledge will atrophy over time, particularly if it's learned later in life. So you do have to keep reapplying it. But for example, I used to be a musician. I learned a lot of that when my brain was still growing. So I still do have a few of those skills sitting in the depth of my brain somewhere, as opposed to learning new things about things I've learned later in my career, which I've actively just dissipated now that I've gotten rid of them. But I never think that my brain is full. I always have this perspective that I can keep growing and changing and learning with time. Now, from a physiological perspective, we tend to stop being able to learn as much as we get older. Some of the key milestones I think is it's between 7 and 10 years old for learning a second language. And then generally after 25, learning becomes a little bit more slower. But one of the key physiological trends when it comes to learning is the concept of neuroplasticity. So neuroplasticity is the concept, and is legitimately true, that the idea is that our brains don't just stop and you're done. They are constantly adapting to your environment, adapting to the way that you receive information and sensor information from the outside world, and that you can keep rewiring and reconfiguring these neural networks in your brain to keep learning and associating new tasks and skills and experiences to become a better person, even if you are older. Look, I'm 31 and I've learned a shitload of stuff over the last 6 to 8 months out of necessity, because I've had to, because in my mind and in my external environment, that's changing. I know to survive that I need to adapt to this environment. So I take in the skills that I need to, so I think that I can feel comfortable in this new place that I'm putting myself in. So yeah, physiologically, you are not necessarily limited, even if you are a little bit older, to learning new things. It can be not as fast, but it does not mean that you are limited in your growth capacity to learn. So keep reading. Fucking just read. Just take in new information. Dr. Andrew Huberman, who is a guy that I have referenced and will continue to reference, a great resource of information. He's a neuroscientist based out of Stanford. He's been on Rogan a couple of times as well, and a lot of other podcasts, due to his podcast on releasing industry-leading research around neuroscience. He's something he calls the human operating manual. So leveraging our physiological processes for human optimization. And human optimization is a big part of who I am. So improving myself physically, mentally, spiritually, etc. So I would highly recommend following Andrew Huberman on Instagram. If you want to listen to the pod, I think I said this last time, go ahead, do it. It can be a bit dry. I just take his tips and tricks from other articles and other reduced forms of information. But stuff on understanding that repetition, getting proper sleep, taking naps to improve your cognitive ability to learn and retain information. He's got some fantastic protocols on how to do that. Some of the ones that I do most often from his stuff is first thing in the morning, I try and get as much natural light as I can to activate my, what's the hell is that process? Damn, what's it called? Circadian rhythm. So he talks about utilization of light to regulate your circadian rhythm, which is what regulates your sleep and a lot of other mental processes throughout the day to keep you sharp. Thanks to him, I've improved my sleep hygiene in general, so sleeping better. So what I do is I actually I sleep with tape over my mouth. Some people would say that tape is on the wrong part of the day for my mouth. And that helps me breathe through my nose better, so I get better quality oxygen flow and better quality sleep as a result, and I recover better. One of his other things that he has taught me that I really like is taking naps. So taking a 20 to 30 minute nap most days. A, it replenishes your energy for the day. B, it's also extremely useful to retain information that you have just learnt within that day. So if you're learning a new skill, like for me, I'm playing music again, I'm playing bass again. taking a nap after doing a session of doing scales or playing a song, it helps neurologically to integrate that new information into your mind so that it becomes easier to learn and to recall as you keep learning. So look at the Huberman Pod. Really, really highly recommend it. Don't believe that you are limited physiologically by the process of learning, because you are absolutely not. Some of the other things that I do to maximize my learning capability. What else do I do? Nootropics. So nootropics are basically a bunch of supplements that improve cognitive functions within your brain. So memory retention, focus, just those are the main two, really. Just cognitive functions, being sharper, recalling information quicker, being able to retain things for longer. So one of the things that I've been taking for years is Alpha Brain by Onnit. A lot of my friends know that I've talked extensively about Alpha Brain. I fucking love it. I've used it for years. I do not get paid to say this, but I would absolutely fucking love to get paid to say that I use Alpha Brain. So Onnit, reach out. I've got listeners in the double figures to this. So, hey, plenty of potential for new opportunities here. But I would not necessarily recommend nootropics. Again, any supplementation is like the final couple of percent to round out good behavioral changes and day-to-day operations and functions within your life. Supplements are not the answer to fixing problems. They are literally supplements for a reason. They help, but they are not the fucking they're not fixing the root cause of your problems. So, sure, you can try Alpha Brain if you need a little bit of pep. What it does for me is that, it just focuses me in. I get a little bit sharper, and it helps me learn things quicker. So when I first started my job, and I was getting really complex when I was at Telstra, and I had to learn a whole bunch of shit at once, I would take Alpha Brain every day in the morning with a strong coffee, and I would probably get about 3 to 4 hours of focused work done. I was an absolute rocket, and I learned a lot of shit real quick. Absolutely stand by it. There are other nootropics out in the market now, Alpha GPC, just heaps out there. Do your research if you think there's something else that benefits you, but Alpha Brain was really the first one on the market globally when it came to high quality nootropics. I still stand by it. Check it out. Gotta fucking get a fucking referral code. Hit me up, Aubry. But so those are the ways that you can adapt to learning, but where are the sources of information? Where are the quality sources of information in your life? Now, that is a big one, right? That's the big question when it comes to this information slash misinformation issue, is that what do you trust to have quality information nowadays? That's entirely up to you and what you think you should be listening to. But with that, it really depends on what you are trying to achieve. What are you trying to get out of the information that you're trying to pursue? Now, one of the best ways that I have done that to change my ecosystem for the better of information is to be very selective about what I put myself in front of. So one of the big things I'm big on, this is a really major practice for me, and I recommend it to you quite heavily as well, is to change your mental diet, is to fix your mental diet. What I mean by that is being very thorough about the things that you interconnect and interplay with and what your attention is placed on during the day, and figuring out whether they serve you or not. So, are the people that you spend time with, are they drainers? Do they add to your life, or are they critical? Are they giving you useful information and are boosting you up, or are they tearing you down? If they're tearing you down, fucking get rid of them, right? This is about you and your best outcome. A lot of these entrepreneurs and successful people say that you are the result of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And I tend to agree with that, because I think we are way more affected by our environment than we care to let on. When people talk about the concept of nature versus nurture, I believe that we have an inherent nature, and then the nurturing environment of where that's kept is what influences how much of our nature we do retain. So if we have a very pure nature and our natural environment that we surround ourselves in is very dangerous, we're going to hide that, and the nurturing of that nature doesn't really happen. And then to take that a step further, things like trauma and emotional damage need to be peeled away and healed from the nurtured aspect of where we exist to get to our true nature. But we'll speak about that in a different pod. But here's a great one, actually. This was something that was recommended to me on the internet. It makes so much sense. I did it without even knowing that I had done it, but when it was put out to me externally, which is such a great idea, is to do a cleanse of your social media, right? Because very likely the 5 people you spend the most time with aren't as much as the time that you spend on your fucking phone. So, what do you see on your phone? What is the content that you consume on your phone? What is the social media that you have in front of your face every day? Take a good, thorough look at that. Have a look at whether it serves you, whether it motivates you, whether it's a positive influence in your life, or is it some dumb shit like some vapid idiot, or stuff related to bad habits, or just time sinks, right? I mean, sure, have a couple of meme pages and things like that, but really go through with a fine-tooth comb and look at the content, scroll through your feed and go, is this useful for me? And if it's not, get rid of it and replace it with things that you are genuinely interested in or things that you strive towards. I can tell you now, my feed is just full of motivational things, other entrepreneurs, motivational speakers, business infopreneurs, which we'll talk about next, business tips, strategy tips, marketing tips, because one of the great things about the internet now, it's when we're talking about trends, is the trend of like content marketing and providing value up front to users to build that authentic brand that so many of our new media organizations are trying to do. So what do? They give out little tips and tricks, and they create value to you as the end user by sharing information that could be relevant and useful to you, right? It could be, how to create a strategy, how to create something cool on Canva, how to how to maximize your social media visibility. Those are some of the examples that I've got that are in my feed and that I rely on to actually get little things done, and get those little tips and tricks, and they work. So I really recommend changing your feed. Make sure it serves you. Make sure it gives you information that is relevant and will help you grow, as opposed to being a negative influence in your life. Because social media can be used positively. It's just that it's been tarred with this brush of being a time sink. And let's be honest, it is a time sink. I sink a lot of useless time into it. But if used properly, just like any other tool, it can actually be a source for good. And that's been part of my own evolution in using social media, is to make it less of a distraction. So when I am distracted by it, it actually pushes me to go back out there and get shit done, which it does a lot. It's a very surprising tool. But again, clean up your social media feed, clean up the influences in your life. Do they rise you up? Do they benefit you? Do they increase your energy? If not, might be time to get rid of it. So to go back to infopreneurs, that's an interesting concept that was coined by one of the people that I really look up to, Aubry Marcus, who are entrepreneurs that lead and create value by sharing information and wisdom and guidance. And just like I said before, all the content marketers that are out there, that's what they're trying to do, is create authentic brands by leading with value. And that value is through information and knowledge to help benefit you. So who are the people that I look to as maybe a great starting point for you, people that I highly recommend that you start paying attention to create some more positive influence in your life? Like I said before, number one, Aubry Marcus. He's been a big influence on me over the last couple of years. Aubry is the CEO and founder of Onnit, the creator of Alpha Brain, what I mentioned before. He's got a very spiritually led approach to the way that he engages with his fans, the way he manages his organization, and is very open and honest about his experiences, and is very humble about what he's achieved and what he's trying to achieve by being empathetic to everyone's cause. And that's something that I really have aligned to over the last couple of years throughout this transformation. I think he is a great, authentic guide star and leader to what we should be striving towards in corporate responsibility as an organization and as a corporation that can add value, and just as a good fucking guy in general. You know, check Aubry Marcus's podcast out. Massive fan of it. It might get a little bit too woo-woo for you, but, you know, hold on to it. It's worth hanging in there for. Another one worth paying attention to is Rogan. We all know Joe is massive. He's massive for a reason, because he is authentic. He is not trying to sell you bullshit. You have to use your discernment when it comes to his perspective, but he's very reasonable about the way he approaches things. He is a positive influence. I do believe he's a positive influence. People tar him as being a little bit pig-headed and masculine, but sometimes masculinity is incorrectly framed as toxic when it is just the reality of what masculine is. And that's one of my gripes with the left, is that it becomes too soft and it becomes a threat to what they perceive as what of their own gaps in their own masculinity. And that becomes a problem, right? But I love Joe. There's a very good chance if you're listening to this, you like Joe too. Keep listening, keep watching. He is someone that is in pursuit of authentic truth in his own little way. Someone else that I really love, I've actually gotten into Gary Vee. When I first heard about Gary Vee, I was like, who the fuck is this guy? Just some mouthy, talky dude. I didn't really understand him. But now that I've actually taken the time to listen to what he says and does and the way he acts, he's actually a very, very smart guy, and it seems to be quite authentic about the way that he goes about his operations, and talking about how social media is the way of the future and expressing yourself authentically is the great way to create a brand. He is probably one of the major facilitators of this new wave of authentic brands and expressions out in the media landscape. So if you are someone that's trying to break into social media marketing, and just be involved in all these new trends, such as the creator economy and things we've talked about in this podcast so far, check out Gary. He's got little tips and tricks. He's an absolute content machine as well, since he's got a team behind him that, you know, puts out tons of shit. Check him out. Another one is Ryan Holiday. So Ryan Holiday, he runs the Daily Stoic. He is all about Stoicism and the quotes and the practices that you need to learn and understand to improve the quality of your life through the Stoic philosophies. Really just one track. He knows what he's talking about. He nails it day after day after day. The Stoic mindset and philosophy is something that I'll go into a later podcast. But really, a really key piece to maintaining mental clarity and peace is Stoicism. So check Ryan Holiday out, The Daily Stoic, on all social media feeds. He's got some great books around Stoicism and his own interpretation of them. Yeah, really, really rate the guy. He's doing a good job. And then one of my key ones as well is Neil Strauss. Now, you might know Neil Strauss as the writer of The Game, which was that infamous pickup book on pickup artistry, probably about a decade plus ago. But he's actually an award-winning journalist and writer. He's created some other fantastic books, such as Emergency, which is a book around things like doomsday preppers and basically being able to survive in extreme situations. He's done a couple of great biographies as well. But what he's done, he's actually evolved as a person. He's not really he hasn't been this sleuthy pickup artist that he was originally portrayed to be. He's been someone that's constantly grown and evolved with time, and has shared his experiences out in his books, in his newsletters, in his sources of information. And it's been, he's got a lot of stuff on the traumatic healing process and understanding how interpersonal relationships affect us and our belief systems, which is really, really powerful stuff. I bought a course of his called The Money Game, which is basically a culmination of different interviews and resources and lectures on highly successful people and how they manage their relationship to money and how they manage their relationship in money to business and success. It's really, really transformed how I perceive money, and it's changed a lot for me as well. So again, check out Neil's stuff. You might want to start with his book, The Truth, particularly around relationships and understanding how our maternal and paternal relationships affect how we, choose partners, how our trauma affects our decision making when it comes to the way we trust and interconnect with other people. It's really, really interesting stuff. Big fan of Neil's. I actually met him at a book signing probably about, I must have been like 21 or 19 or something around that time. But great dude, really useful information. Just check out his stuff. Really recommend it. And then here's another thing is that don't feel like, I probably should talk about this more, but formal education, I think, is dying. I think that particularly with the pace of information and the increasing regulation that we have around school systems and about what's acceptable socially to talk about and discuss, universities used to be a source of, forward-thinking conversations about progression, but now it's really become about censorship through hyper-progression and the lefty agenda and political correctness, because you've got a whole bunch of bleeding heart kids that want to change the world with their views and be radical. They haven't been weighed down by the realities of life and how slow things actually change. And that has become increasingly weaponized over the last few years. And then you're also thinking like, fuck, what, $20,000 a year to go to university to get a piece of paper that I haven't really applied myself for because I've been too busy binge drinking for the last 3 years. And also everyone else that I'm competing with for a job has this dumb piece of paper as well. And all of this is theory-based and not very engaging and quite impractical to what I'm actually going to do in real life. Doesn't really make sense to be in university anymore. I definitely will never go back to formal education for the rest of my life. But that's not to say that there is a massive wealth of information now on the internet. Particularly now there's this massive trend about online courses thanks to things like COVID, where people with significant amount of practical experience in their field are creating online courses, doing things like this, just filming podcasts and filming video, editing a little bit, putting it on platforms like Thinkific, and selling their experience and practical knowledge of basically any vocation for a significantly lower cost than a formal education would have. And the good thing about that is that that's lived experience. It's not a whole bunch of fucking theories. And it's probably done in a way that's a lot more engaging than a gigantic lecture hall that you cannot be fucked going to. So seek out your experts. Most likely they have a course or are developing a course that you can apply yourself to. And it's a really, really useful way to learn things in the modern world without having to worry about the resource and time cost of formal education. I can tell you in the last 6+ months, I've learned a whole bunch of new skills, all of them from online courses. So talking about the money game before with Neil, Founder, which is they're like a online resource for entrepreneurs. So they've got a bunch of courses on social media and scaling a business. I've bought one of their courses about understanding how to use social media effectively. YouTube, my God, there are so many people that have practical skills that put them on YouTube. How many fucking things? Most people's uni degrees, most of the information probably came from YouTube, right? There's plenty of memes about, particularly if you do STEM, STEM curriculums, science, technology, engineering, maths. That's what it is. Yeah, I'm running out of brain here, guys. I'm really running out of brain here. All being taught by Indian dudes, It might be dry, but it's fucking right. I mean, I've taught myself how to use Premiere Pro to edit this pod and edit a whole bunch of content just by literally Googling what the fuck I need to find on Premiere Pro, Googling it, filtering through the crap, trying it myself. Did it work? Great. Bookmark. If I forget, oh yeah, I remember I did that last time. Bang. Learnt it again. There is a wealth of information all over the internet. You just need to go out and seek it. and it is just as legitimate and practical as a formal education. That's something that I entirely back. It is the future of education because you don't need all this fucking massive infrastructure around what a university provides to be educated, right? All the information now comes to you at the speed of light. Like I fucking said, you've just got to seek it and you've got to take it in effectively. One of the other things that I do to learn, because we talked about attention, was my attention span sucks. And I'm sure yours does too. I've been going on way over an hour. I'm surprised most people listen to this for a full hour, to be quite fucking honest. Because even I'm starting to fucking weary out of my own brain when I talk here. But hey, that's because I'm fucking exhausted. But what I've found is that I don't even read full books anymore. I just read articles. I can't commit to a full book. I've bought probably about 20 books in the last 2 years, and I've read end to end, maybe 2. But I keep buying books because I'm like, yeah, I want that information, but I cannot commit to it because I don't have the attention span. It's a bit fucking sad. But what I do is A, read a lot of articles from trusted sources, and B, I'm a big fan of the application called Blinkist. So what Blinkist does is they get lots of non-fiction books, lots of valuable sources, but mostly books, and they condense them down into what they call blinks. And these are articles or little blocks of information that get to the key points of books, and get to the juice and the gut of what they are. And you can consume an entire book's worth of value and content in like 20 minutes, as opposed to committing the hours you would need to do to finish that book. And then, so that's quite useful, right? And then to take it a step further, what I've done with Blinkist is that I'll read like 7 or 8 books in a particular subject that is non-fiction, that is rated highly, and then condense the commonalities in those books down even further. Then I've got the absolute gems of what is effective. So I'll give you an example. With entrepreneurship, a term that I hate but is inevitably tied to what I do and who I am. When it comes to entrepreneurship, I've read 8 or 9 different books on it. The key 3 things are sell yourself as an individual brand, find a gap in the market, and be persistent. Those are the top 3 things that have been consistent across those 8 books. So that's when I go, okay, I just do that. I focus on those 3. Those are the diamonds out of all of that, the diamonds that have been condensed down from all of that fucking carbon and all that rough. That's the pure gem. And that's a great way to really get to the core of information in any topic that you want to get better at. So highly recommend Blinkist. I think it's like $120 per year on the App Store. Look it up yourself. It's only a few books a year. Again, I don't get paid to say this, although I'd fucking love to. Hit me up, Blinkist. Like I said, I've got double figure listenership on this. So let's make some money. I think that's the show, guys. I got to say, my brain is fucking fried. I think you can tell that by the end of this podcast in the way that I've talked, probably in the way you can see me on the camera as well. I just am fried. But thanks for hanging in there. Thanks for hanging on. That's mostly thanking myself at this point. Next week, we'll be talking about cognition. Now, that's going to be a really funky one, to be honest. I'm going to have to put that together in quite an interesting way. Because that'll be mostly about trauma and experience, which would be quite interesting. Interesting. At least I try and make it anyway. Look, very exciting stuff. The next time you listen to this podcast, Aussie Comedy Network will have begun to launch. We've launched February 27th. I've been talking about it since day dot. Very excited, very scary, but let's fucking do it. So, if you want to support me, support what I'm doing, please, you can already follow Aussie Comedy Network on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. From Feb 27th, we're going to be launching in a big way. You're going to get a shitload of content jammed down your throat from Australia's best and most promising comedians and comedic creators. It's going to be a lot of fun. Please support us. Get involved. You get a free content stream of quality Australian laughs to you. It's a winner. Also, this weekend or next weekend on the 26th, Footscray Comedy Club is putting on their free outdoor comedy show. It's going to be a fuckload of fun. I've got great artists. I've got great comedians. It's going to be music. It's going to be a real vibe. Hucksterburger are doing a deal if you want to get some munchies while you are there. Starts at 6 o'clock. Yep, starts at 6 o'clock. Saturday, 26th at Byron Square, Footscray. Check out at Footscray Comedy Club on Instagram or our website or Facebook. Get yourself a free ticket. You don't need it to get a ticket. It's just for me to figure out how many numbers that I'm going to expect there. It's going to be a lot. Or just show the fuck up. Love to see you there. Tell me about the pod when you do see me there. What do you love? What do you hate? Your feedback, as always, is very much appreciated. I only want to make this better for you. That is me. I'm completely cooked mentally. Now I've got to edit this goddamn thing. My name has been Jameel Raymond. Thank you very much for your time, and I will see you again next week. Ciao.